Hello, and welcome to this English learning video. Today, I will teach you a simple and powerful way to improve your English speaking. It is called the shadowing technique. What is shadowing? Shadowing means you listen to someone speak in English, and then you repeat the words immediately after them. Try to copy the voice, the speed, and the emotion of the speaker. You become like their shadow. That's why it's called shadowing. This method helps you speak more clearly, understand English better, and feel more confident when talking to others. Now, I want to tell you a short and simple story, but this time, you will practice shadowing with me. The story is called The Letter in the Bookstore. It is told by a woman, and she is also the main character. You will listen, repeat, and shadow each sentence. This is a great way to train your brain and your mouth to speak better English. Are you ready? Let's begin. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can get more shadowing stories to practice English. Shadowing story: The Letter in the Bookstore. My name is Emily, and I've always loved books. I don't just mean reading them. I mean the smell of old pages, the feeling of turning through time, the sound of a worn spine cracking open. Books have always been a safe place for me. I grew up in a quiet town with just my father. He worked nights as a security guard, and I spent most of my evenings curled up on the sofa with a blanket, a cup of tea, and a novel. My best memories are not of vacations or parties. They're the little bookstore on Maple Street, where I used to go after school just to get lost in stories. Now, at 29, I work in that same bookstore. It's called Oak and Ink, and it's been around for over 50 years. It's small, filled with wooden shelves that reach almost to the ceiling, and it smells like paper, coffee, and dust. We get a mix of new books and secondhand treasures. And every once in a while, someone donates a box of books, not knowing what forgotten things lie hidden inside. One rainy Tuesday morning, I was in the back of the shop sorting through a box of donated books. Most of them were old cookbooks, romance novels, and school textbooks. But at the bottom of the box, I found something different. It was a leather-bound journal, plain on the outside, with no title. I opened it out of curiosity, thinking it might be someone's personal diary. Inside, I saw dates, short entries, and beautiful handwriting. The first page simply said, "To whoever finds this, I'm sorry." I paused. My heart beat a little faster. I kept reading. The next entry was dated 7 years ago. It spoke about a woman named Claire who had disappeared without a trace. The writer said he had loved her, lost her, and never recovered. The more I read, the more I realized this wasn't just a diary. It was more like a confession. It spoke of secrets, regrets, and something hidden. Something dangerous. At first, I wasn't sure if it was fiction or real. Maybe someone had written a story and left it behind. But as I turned the pages, something strange happened. I saw a name I recognized. It was the name of a customer who used to come to the store every Thursday, Mr. Graham. A quiet older man who always wore a gray hat and never stayed long. The writer mentioned meeting Claire at the exact same bookstore, saying she came in looking for a poetry book. The entry said, "She walked in during a storm, rain in her hair, and asked for a book by Rainer Maria Rilke." That's when everything changed. That same scene had happened months ago. I remembered it because I helped a woman find that exact book on a stormy afternoon. She wore a green coat and smiled nervously when she thanked me. I never saw her again. Suddenly, I wasn't just reading someone else's words. I was part of the story. The journal had somehow landed in our hands after years of silence. And now it was speaking again. I decided to keep reading. But this time, not as a curious bookseller, as someone who might need to understand what really happened. The next morning, I arrived at the bookstore early. I couldn't stop thinking about the journal. I wanted to know who had written it and why it had ended up in that donation box. I made a cup of coffee, unlocked the back door, and sat at my small desk with the leather book in front of me. The cover felt smooth and familiar, as if it had been waiting for someone to hold it again. I opened to the next entry. It was dated 4 months after the last one. The handwriting looked shakier, and the tone was darker. I think someone is watching me. Every day when I leave my apartment, I see the same man across the street. He never says anything, just watches. I know it sounds crazy, but I think it has something to do with Claire. I felt a chill. The writer didn't sign the entry. None of them were signed. But the way he described things, the feelings, the moments, made me believe it was real. He was afraid. And Claire, what happened to her? Why did she disappear? That day, I saw Mr. Graham walk into the bookstore again. Same gray hat, same soft steps. I watched him from behind a shelf. He went straight to the poetry section, picked up a thin volume, and stood there reading. My heart was pounding. Should I ask him? Should I mention the journal? What if he knew something? What if he was the writer? I walked slowly toward him. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound casual. He looked up and smiled politely. Good morning, Emily." He knew my name. Of course, I worked there, but still it caught me off guard. I hesitated, then asked, "Do you like Rainer Maria Rilke?" He paused. His eyes flickered with something. Memory? Recognition? "I do," he said softly. Beautiful words. Sad, but full of truth. I nodded. "There was a woman a few months ago. She came looking for one of his books. Do you remember her?" He looked down at the book in his hands. Then he said, "Yes, I remember." I waited, but he didn't say more. I wanted to push, to ask what he knew, but I didn't. Something told me it wasn't time yet. That night, I took the journal home. I read every page, again and again. One entry described a park bench near the lake, a place where the writer used to meet Claire. I knew that park. It was only a few blocks from my apartment. The next morning, I went there. I sat on the bench holding the journal and looked around. Then I saw something. Carved into the wood of the bench were 2 initials, C+J. Underneath, the word forever. I touched the letters with my fingers. This wasn't just a story. It was real, and I had to find out how it ended. I returned to the bookstore the next day, determined to speak to Mr. Graham again. I had questions that only he could answer. But he didn't show up. Not that day or the next. A week passed. I started to think maybe he wasn't coming back. Or maybe he knew I was getting close to the truth. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. It had no return address. The envelope was old, yellowed at the edges, and addressed to me by name, in the same handwriting as the journal. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short note. "Emily, if you're reading this, you've found what I buried. The truth isn't in the journal alone. There's a box under the floorboards, near the poetry shelf. Claire wanted people to know. And now it's your turn. Be careful. J." My heart raced. The floorboards near the poetry shelf had always creaked a little, but I never thought much of it. That evening, when the shop was empty, I moved one of the display tables aside and pulled up the boards. Dust filled the air, and I coughed as I reached into the dark space below. My fingers touched something wooden. It was a small chest, locked with a simple latch. I opened it slowly. Inside were letters, photographs, and an old cassette tape labeled Claire, last recording. There was also a newspaper clipping from 1996, young woman missing, last seen near Maple Street. I spent the night going through everything. The letters were between Claire and someone named James, probably the same J, who had written the journal. Their words were full of love, hope, and growing fear. The last letters were desperate. Claire believed someone was following her. She wrote about a man in a gray hat, Mr. Graham. The tape was harder to hear, but I managed to play it. Claire's voice was soft, a little shaky. If anything happens to me, this is for whoever finds it.
James tried to help.
I was going to the police, but I was scared. If you're listening, please tell the truth. Don't let it stay hidden. I cried. Not just because of what happened to Claire, but because I felt like I knew her now. Her fear, her courage, her voice still echoing through time. The next day, I went to the local police. I handed them everything, the journal, the letters, the recording. They listened. They took it seriously. And a few weeks later, I heard back. The case had been reopened. Claire's disappearance was no longer forgotten. Mr. Graham was questioned. And though he denied everything, the evidence was strong enough to take it further. Justice, long delayed, was finally possible. And me? I still work at Oak and Ink. But I'm not the same person. I learned that sometimes stories aren't just stories. Sometimes they're pieces of truth, waiting to be discovered. I found courage I didn't know I had. I gave a voice to someone who is almost lost. Books can hold secrets, but readers, brave, curious readers, can unlock them. Thank you for shadowing with me today. If you enjoyed this story and want to practice more, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. More shadowing stories are coming soon. See you in the next video.